Hello there everyone, it is TIJ Gaming and welcome to a brand new Football Manager 2021 team guide. Today it is the turn of the Hammers, West Ham United, who of course play in the Premier League. It is West Ham's 125th season, a nice little thing at the start of the save that West Ham have hired me, Toby Jones, in their landmark season, their 125th manager. We lack the reputation of a survival specialist, but oh well. Well, why have you clicked on this video, you might ask? But these team guides are designed to help you who might well be an inexperienced player of Football Manager or somebody starting a West Ham side, potentially looking for a head start. This is exactly what these videos are designed for. I'm not going to bring anything particularly new to the table in terms of groundbreaking tactics or whatever. These videos are just a 10-15 minute summary of the side that you're going to start with West Ham. A few tips and tricks possibly, and what I'd do starting in the job. So we're going to cover the club vision, any new players that West Ham have signed, the dynamics at the club, the tactic I'd choose, as well as a few youngsters to watch. Let's get straight to it, because some of these videos have been a bit longer than I'd have liked. But there are 5 objectives in the club culture. One of those is to play attacking football, which is interesting. I think a lot of clubs want you to do this these days. I haven't quite checked Burnley's objectives yet, but I think they're probably the only club in the league who would not want you to play attacking footballs, possibly. I don't know, I might be being harsh on Burnley there. They want you to develop players using the club's youth system. West Ham have always had a decent youth system, it's fair to say. Don't sign players over the age of 13, sign players under the age of 22. That's something that seems to come up quite a lot this year. Sign players under the age of this, and don't sign players over the age of this. And the problem is there's no middle ground, is there? There's not really a suggestion of, right, sign players that are sort of 25, 26 for the first team. However, there's no law that says you can't, like signing players over 30. So I'd take that with a bit of pinch of salt. As long as you don't sign players over 30 and keep the club cushy with signing a few players under the age of 22 for the future, you might be alright. But I think a good thing to do here to potentially try and meet that objective is to, if we can find it, find and sign young players for the future. Delegate that to your director of football. It's Tony Levy in this aspect, but he's actually a new gen, if you like, in the game. So you might look to potentially bring in a real director of football, something that I don't think West Ham have clearly got, because it's bought a fake director of football in. But to reach that objective, that might be a good idea. Another desired objective is to sign high reputation players. So I would suggest you can't really sign players under the age of 22 and high reputation players, because if there are players that are under the age of 2, under the age of 22 and are already high reputation, well, they're going to cost you a bob or two, aren't they? You can certainly figure that one out. In terms of the 5-year plan, the standard, work within the wage budget. Your current wage budget is $1,479,000. That gives you over £100,000 leeway, which is probably one of the most I've seen yet. A healthy transfer budget of £10 million. Certainly not a bad start starting with West Ham. Interesting. At the end of the current season, they want you to finish in mid-table in the Premier League, reach the 5th round of the FA Cup and the 4th round of the EFL Cup. So nothing particularly special there. You'd expect West Ham being a well-established Premier League club. They've been back in the Premier League for, They've been back for 7, 8, if not 9 years now. So mid-table is really where they should be. They are certainly better than 5 or 6 clubs in the league, at least. So should have no problem with that. Reach the 5th round of the FA Cup. That's something that's required. These first 2 objectives are required. And if you can, reach the 4th round of the EFL Cup. You go into the EFL Cup, I believe, at the 2nd round. I think you're going to the 2nd round of the EFL Cup. Just check that. Yep, 2nd round of the EFL Cup. So get through 2 rounds and the club will be happy. But if you don't reach that, but get to the 5th round of the FA Cup, the club will be happy. I've said this in every team guide so far. If you go for the EFL Cup, you're really stupid. You just go for the EFL Cup and don't care about the league. If you go and win the EFL Cup and get relegated, you're going to get the sack. You know, obviously the Premier League is more important, but if you do win the EFL Cup and maybe finish a little below mid-table, say 13th or 14th, then the club will forgive you. But obviously, if you go ridiculously in the way of the EFL Cup and don't do anything in the Premier League, then they won't be happy. Similarly, well, not particularly similarly, but if you do finish, I don't know, 5th in the Premier League and get knocked out of both the cups in the first round, the club ain't going to be too bothered. Going forward, they want you to record a Premier League top half finish. That's within the first 3 seasons, and then maintain that going forward. I don't think that's too bad. I really don't think that's too bad at all. I don't think there's much you can argue with there. After a few years, there's a solid side here. I was actually quite surprised, and that's not patronising to West Ham. It really isn't, but they've done really well in terms of the players they've brought through, and it looks like a good side to play with. So let's have a look at that side. But before, let's quickly just have a look at the new players that have come in now. 2 big signings from Slavia Prague, funnily enough, a club I'm playing against in my next episode of the Wolves save in the Europa League. But Tomas Souček is a new signing, midfielder and defensive midfielder. More of a defensive midfielder, I'd say, but a midfielder in the centre as well. Signed for 15 million from Slavia Prague in the Czech Republic. Was on loan at the club last year and has signed on a permanent transfer this year. So he's going to be second or third in the choice at central midfielder. Obviously, Mark Noble's getting on a bit. He's 33 years of age. So, you know, a good depth player to bring in. Definitely a decent player for most Premier League sides. Looks a pretty good player. The other big sign is Vladimir Koufalo, who's also coming from Slavia Prague. He looks like he's going to be the first choice right back. Maybe Ryan Fredericks, but again, he's 27. Craig Dawson, he's 30. He's on loan from Watford. Very much a depth player, I think. Yeah, looks like Koufalo's probably going to be your first choice. A few loans as well. Talk just about Craig Dawson. Again, pretty much a depth player at centre-back, really. And then Saeed Benrahma has come in on loan from Brentford, the Algerian, and he's going to join the club on a permanent transfer next year for the cost of 20 million. A 25-year-old winger, could improve. He's probably second choice on the left wing, and then on the right wing, he's sort of second or third choice. So I'm not entirely sure about that signing, but, you know, stats on everything. You have to see how he gets on. A few out, but nothing terrible. I know that the club were really irked, and the fans were irked about Grady Diangana going to West Brom for £12 million. He was out on loan there last year, and he seemed to be one of the better youth guys at West Ham, and West Brom have signed him. So the club, the club had to do it. Well, the club chose to do it. The board did, whatever, however you think about the board, I suppose. But the fans weren't too chuffed about it. So this is the squad then you've got for the season, looking at the dynamics. You've got 3 team leaders, Mark Noble, Lucas Fabianski and Declan Rice. And the reason I haven't gone from left to right is because the 2 players that I mentioned first are both getting to the end of their careers. I know players like maybe Antonio's 30, Cresswell's 30, Yarmolenko's 30. You've got a bit of an ageing squad, actually, which is a little bit of a worry. And I didn't really think about that. Again, Ogbonna's 32, David Martin 34, 32, 27 Ryan Fredericks. By a long way, Ryan Fredericks is the youngest player in your team leaders list, of course, apart from Declan Rice at the age of 21. But I guess some players could come through. The likes of Jared Bowen, he's 23. He could potentially come into that team leaders group, being part of the core social group. How old's Lanzini these days? 27 again? Yeah, he's not the youngest, but possibly. Balbuena's 29, Masuaku 26. So I think maybe Jared Bowen could become a team leader with Declan Rice. I'd be a bit concerned about that, though. With those 2, Noble and Fabianski, both leaving the club in the future, the near future probably, with them both retiring. As it says there, they'll definitely miss the leadership, because I can't see anybody long-term going into those team leader places. So you'll have to keep a watch on that, and maybe bring someone through the youth system, but that's going to take a while, unless there's an absolute stunner down there. Running on to the tactics then, I've decided to go with a fluid counter-attacking tactic with West Ham. I know that they've said to play attacking football, but that's not really in terms of the mentality. It's purely just to score many goals per game. As you can see, it says here, if you highlight this, a philosophy under which it is expected the team will have high goals to games and shots to games ratios. And I don't think this year it's particularly important if you play on cautious, positive or attacking. But we've got Fabianski in the net, Ben Johnson at right back, not exactly sure about that. We're going to put Koufal in there instead, actually. Issa Diop and Cardoso at centre back, but again you've got Balbuena who can fill in. I don't know why Cardoso and that right back's got in there. I must have made a mistake. But you've got Craig Dawson, Angelo even, Ogbonna, who can come in. Got Aaron Cresswell at left back, but really Arthur Masuaku is your first choice there. Declan Rice, he's a defensive midfielder through and through. That's his best position. 4 stars as a defensive midfielder and a defensive mentality. So we've got him there. Mark Noble and Pablo Fornals in the midfield, but we've talked about Mark Noble getting on a bit maybe, so Tomas Souček might be the natural choice there, potentially ahead of Mark Noble. On the wings, we've got Mikel Antonio and Jared Bowen. Now, Antonio would probably be my striker, preferably, but because you've got Sebastian Haller who's up front, and he can only play up front, if you want both of the players in the squad, I'm afraid that Antonio's not going to be able to play up front. In this formation anyway, I suppose you could play with a 2 at the front and maybe put someone on the right wing, I don't know. But I think that bringing Antonio on that right wing is probably the best way to go. And as you've noticed, I've put Haller on a support role because if you put him on an advanced forward, for example, I was going to say for goodness sake, that's a bit harsh. But there's major issues in the attacking midfield. So I've just brought him back a bit. If you play on deep line forward attack, yeah, it's not too bad. There's some minor issues. If you bring him back to support, there's no issues at all. But obviously, you're probably wanting to be on attack because you're wanting to push forward a little bit. But it looks like a good side West Ham has. Again, I'm not trying to patronise the fans here at all, but a lot of good players. Lucas Fabianski's always been a solid goalkeeper. The defence maybe leaves a little bit to be desired, potentially. But the midfield, Declan Rice, Souček, Pablo Fornals. I mean, Fornals 24, Souček 25. A nice youthful midfield. You've got Jared Bowen, who's quite young. Ben Rama, who's 25 as well. So, a bit of Deadwood, maybe. The likes of David Martin, potentially. Mark Noble, you could argue. Winston Reid, who's already out on loan. Felipe Anderson's 27, but I think he could definitely come into the side and do a job for you next year if he comes back, and he's happy to come back. But let's have a look at the youngsters before we finish off this team guide, just to see if there's anyone here who could come into the first team squad. Now, I've always quite liked this screen, the development centre. They added it to the game a few years ago, and Ricky Martin, not the one who did Live in Davida Loca. It better not be anyway. No, I don't think the head of youth development at Norwich was credited with that song, but really nice screen this is. It shows your first team candidates, so players that are good enough to jump into that first team. Now, you can see that there's a midfielder there, Alesi, not John Alesi, Ajibola Alesi, who doesn't look too great, to be honest, but could be a decent player for the first team. Connor Coventry, he could be a good player, could be a really good player. He's potentially a superb player for the first team. And Nathan Trott as well, who could be an interesting prospect. Again, if David Martin leaves the club, then Nathan Trott comes in as a perfect third choice. You've also got your needs attention players here, players that might need notice if they have an injury or need to go out on loan, etc, etc. Some attention of some kind. Need their arm round them, maybe. You've got the ones to watch here, 5 players who, and this will dynamically change, of course, 5 players to watch in the team that are doing really well or potentially aren't doing as well as hoped. As you can see here, the likes of Harrison Ashby is currently could become a quality player and as good as Craig Dawson, so keep a watch on him. Under 23 squad, anyone really showing to be a fantastic player? I mean, Sean Adarkwa could be decent, 1.5 stars at the moment. He's 1.5 stars. 3 stars to 4, so he's certainly going to be a good player for the first team. And again, basing the fact that you've got quite a few older strikers here, he definitely could come in. I think it's probably time for him to go out on loan somewhere. Never really played any first team football, so that might be an idea. Although his acceleration, etc., do worry me a little. But I guess, that will improve over time. Connor Coventry we talked about earlier. We've talked about a few of these. Bernardo Rosa, the 19-year-old. He's a decent young prospect. Could be good for the first team, but again, the younger the players are, sometimes the trickier it is to tell how they're going to develop. But some of these players, maybe the likes of Alfie Lewis, I would say Deadwood at this time, they're not going to get much better. Again, like this guy, Adolapo, God, that's a mouthful, Adolapo Afolayan. But as it says there, might not have the required ability or potential. I think it might be time for him to go out. He does go out of contract at the end of the year, and there you go. That's pretty much as you'd expect. I don't tend to talk too much about the under-18s. You can see Kevin Keane is the under-18s manager. He's been there only the season now, surprisingly, but he's a man who's been round the block, knows what he's doing. He's been the caretaker manager of West Ham and also played for the club, of course, back in the early 2000s. But there's some good potential players looking here in the under-18s. Jamal Baptiste, Jayden Fevrier, which is February in French, would you know? And Archie Woods, the 16-year-old. But I think you have to take these potentials with a bit of a pinch of salt because the younger the players are, the more uncertainty you've got. For example, Baptiste could become a 3-star player, which is still good. Could become a 5-star player. Maybe if you look at sort of Remy Coddington, could become a good player for the first team, or might not make it. It's a big difference between that. So it's a squad that's looking great for the future, but focus on it using this screen. You've got the loan screen as well to analyse players that are out on loan. Similarly, you can look at players that are at the club on loan, but this is generally players that are out on loan. As you can see, a few loan suggestions there, a few of the players we mentioned earlier. That's going to be it for this West Ham team guide. Hopefully you've found it beneficial. Luckily, it's a little bit shorter than I've done the other ones. I'm trying to keep these to 15 minutes, so I'm not keeping you for too long. But if you did enjoy that and found it beneficial, make sure you leave a like down below. If there's any tips or tricks you've got, if you've watched this video and you're a more experienced FM player and maybe a West Ham fan, And there's a player maybe in the under-23s that I haven't focused on and maybe he's worth focusing on. Of course, any transfer suggestions, etc., etc., feel free to help your fellow player out down in the comments. And if you're that player that's inexperienced at Football Manager, leave a comment down below that you might be struggling with something or have got a question. Myself or anybody else, I'm sure will be more than happy to answer it down in the comments. But that's going to be it for today's team guide with West Ham United. I am working slowly but surely on these team guides. I think this is the 9th team guide now, so we're going to do all the 20 Premier League clubs. We've done 9 already, including this one, so go and check out the other ones. There will certainly be one in the end screen for you to go and check out, and there's also the latest episode of my FM21 Wolves Beta Save, and I'd really appreciate if you go and check that out, and hopefully you'll enjoy that as well. But I've been TIJ Gaming, thank you for your company today, and I will see you guys later on. Goodbye for now.